We ready? All right, we're on then. I feel a little inept introducing Franklin. I thought Will's go do this, and I just got drafted a few minutes ago. But Franklin, whether he remembers it or not, goes back to my life in clinical pastoral education at Georgia Regional Hospital, Chapel Wilson, back in 1982 and 83. Franklin's one of those people, I believe, who can step in your life and make a significant difference. And it was in those didactics that we had in CPE when he would come down from Athens General, I believe that's right, Franklin, and that he began to influence the way I thought about things. And he, in his own Franklin way, helped me free myself up from a lot of the indoctrination that I had had as a Baptist. Amen. Franklin helped me become a freer person. And then over the years, I have held him in high regard. So Franklin, I want you to know that you are top drawer with me.
Thank you.
At Georgia Baptist, when I was working with Jerry and Lee and Dole and Will and all you folks there, and Greg Samples and Ed Nash and Gene Locke, all those folks that were a part of our crew back then, Skip, you know, Franklin was a part of that mixture that was instructing some of us in our D-Min studies. And I've held on to one thing that Franklin said to us when we were talking about doing couples therapy. Franklin said, always remember, there's stuff on both sides of the fence. You know, don't let yourself get polarized. Understand that there's stuff on both sides of the fence, and that was always helpful. And over the years, when I've known Franklin at GMFT conferences and the places we've rubbed shoulders together, he's always treated me with dignity and respect, and I hold him in high regard. Franklin, in my book, is one of our top drawer senior therapists in the state of Georgia. He's a wise man. He understands and works very well from what I consider an experiential way of working in therapy. And tonight, he's going to talk a little bit about maybe some of his influences with that and his thinking at this point in his life about therapy as it reflects on the long years that he has practiced since, gosh, I don't even know when. It goes way back. So I'll just shut my trap and turn it over to Franklin. Franklin, you take over and go from there.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. I'm honored by that. It's good to be with all of you and have the opportunity here in my retirement to kind of share with you something about my life and the process of my life, how I've reached becoming an experiential psychotherapist. I thought I would share with you how that's happened. And as I've gone through that and preparing for this, I've been amazed at the names and the dates and things that I've forgotten that begin to come back to my memory. I thought I would start by, first of all, before I get into my history with you about that, is just give you a short summary of what experiential psychotherapy is. I'm getting this from Dick Felder's and Abram Weiss's book on experiential psychotherapy. Dick Felder was one of the clinicians in our clinic from the very beginning. and a deep friend of mine. But they basically posit three basic principles of experiential psychotherapy. One is that the unconscious is naturally oriented towards growth and wellness other than regression and pathology. In other words, you find that the unconscious basically offers the opportunity for healing and growth. Secondly, that pathology and healing exists in the context of a relationship between the therapist and the client. And three, the therapist is deeply, personally, and inexorably part of the therapeutic relationship. So much so that the primary dynamics of the therapeutic relationship reside in the therapist. They also make a distinction between counseling and psychotherapy. Counseling is primarily concerned with the patient's external realities. An attempt is made to reduce anxiety and solve problems. So it's basically that of trying to get close to the patient and help the client or the patient begin to deal with problems. It's action oriented. Whereas intimacy and therapy go together, where the focus is on the patient's experience, both conscious and unconscious, and with the relationship of the patient with the therapist. The central component here is the person of the therapist. And so in terms of that, if we think of that, that is experiential psychotherapy. I'm reminded that in my life and work, I've had all kinds of exposure to psychoanalysis, to object relations, Gestalt therapy, TA, you name it, all of the different kinds of systems of therapy or of theories about personality. And after you think about all of those, I feel in many ways they become more integrated into an experiential approach. I remember that Picasso was asked, do you think that a young artist needs to learn all the techniques and all the stuff in terms of drawing and painting so that do they really need teachers? And Picasso replied, absolutely. By all means, as an artist, get all of the teachers you can find. Learn anything you can about all the ways of painting and drawing. Do all of that, then forget it and become an artist. So there's a way in which we're looking at ways that we don't allow the system or the concepts to interfere in our relationship with the client. I remember in my early days in doing therapy and counseling with patients and clients that they did a loving thing for me. They left. I was trying to help them in all kinds of ways with what I saw their problems be. But when I finally learned that I needed to find a way to be with them and not try to solve their problems, they felt connected to me. And I'll talk more about that later. Let me just kind of give you some of my history, which led to where I am now. With my family, my father was a civic leader, a businessman, and my mother was more religious. My father was more spiritual. I had a younger brother who was gregarious and very bright. And in our family, we basically experience was of loving one another, caring for one another was a primary dynamic in all kinds of ways. And particularly from my father, who was always there and present when he needed to be. My mother was more serene and more withdrawn and more unavailable at times. She was a good person. She cared very deeply, but it was evident to me as the years gone by that she was very restricted in what she could really express. In my adolescence, I felt a call to ministry and I began to preach. I was preaching in my own church. I was preaching in other churches when I was 16 and 17, believe it or not. And I was preaching about things that I did not have the experience to understand. And I understood inside myself that if I continued to do this ad infinitum, I basically would die inside. But I had a lucky break. I had a person who had a bookstore. She was a Presbyterian lay woman. Her husband was a lawyer. He had his law practice office upstairs, and she had a bookstore under that. And if I went into the bookstore, she would say, "Franklin, come here. This is the book you need to get and read." One of the first books she gave me was Paul Tillich's Dynamics of Faith. And then after that, she gave me other books, but she also gave me Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship. And she continued to give me books. And one was the Interpreter's Bible Commentary, which was a very liberal kind of commentary. And I had the original copies of that particular commentary as it came out in the 50s. And then I went to Baylor University, which was very significant to me. I was a basketball player in high school. I was all-state, all-star basketball player. But at Baylor, I was just one of the others. And also, I was in all kinds of things when I was in high school in terms of leadership. And when I got to Baylor, I began to feel that I was lost. And I remember feeling that I needed to leave. And I called my father. I was in a bad relationship with a girl that we were breaking up. I was feeling very lost. And I called my father and told him I was thinking about leaving. And my father said, "Why don't you just go to bed and think about it? Let's talk about it in the morning," which I did. And I went over to a friend's apartment to spend the night. And at 6:30 the next morning, there was a tap on my shoulder, and it was my father. I figured he had driven 400 miles from Fort Stock, Texas to Waco, Texas, and he had to average 100 miles an hour. And he spent the day with me. And to this day, I do, in that experience, I can't tell you what we talked about, but I knew he was there and it made the difference. And every now and then, my therapist, Tom Malone, would say, "Well, you can go to Baylor on that. You can go to Baylor on that one. That'll work. That'll take care of it." Because he was always amazed about how my father cared for me. At Baylor, I was also heavily influenced by Carlisle Marning, who showed up for student week that we would have every year in terms of different kinds of religious programs. And Carlisle Marning was a very honest, bright, brilliant person and pastor that I was deeply influenced by. I spent a great deal of time with him when he came to Baylor to talk to us. And it was at Baylor that I had the opportunity of meeting Wayne Oates, who later became my major professor. He was there to speak, and I was deeply impressed with him. I still remember how Wayne was dressed. As a kid, you understand these things. He was dressed in an olive suit with a vest and red brown shoes and a matching tie, and he talked with such distinction. That summer, before I went to I went to Southern Seminary. We had a youth revival at my church, and the person who was responsible for that was Roger Ray. And Roddy Ray was at Southern Seminary, and he began to tell me all about Southern Seminary and the scholarship there and the people there. And Roddy became a very good friend of mine, and ultimately became a Rockefeller Scholar and, and taught church history in Toledo, Ohio, after he graduated. When I got to Southern Seminary, I felt, of course, very lost about, as anyone would feel in a new area, as going to Louisville, Kentucky, and leaving Texas. But I had wonderful experiences with students there and with people that generally cared for me. I had my first unit of clinical pastoral education there at Louisville General Hospital in 1965. Prior to that, the way I got into pastoral care was in Psychology of Religion 101 that they had there, and Samuel Southern was my professor. And I don't know, those of you who took pastoral care will remember this, but on Fridays we had small groups and verbatim groups where you presided verbatims, and it was more interaction with and peer relationships with anywhere from 6 to 10 people. And so everybody in the class had a leader, and you would be in a small group on Fridays. John Boyle, who was the chaplain at Louisville General Hospital and also had gotten his doctorate under Rhodes, was my group leader. Now, I came from West Texas, and I realized that there were a lot of fundamentalists around everywhere, but I had moved beyond that, and I was sitting there with all of these students, and they were talking this fundamentalist language, and particularly about, I didn't like the way they were treating people with the verbatims they had. In fact, I was getting quite angry about it. And I finally ended up telling them all what I thought of them. And then the bell rang, and they all couldn't get out fast enough. And when the door shut, I broke into tears. And John Boyle put his hand on my shoulder here, and he said, "Franklin, I wish you had been able to do that while they were still here." And I want to tell you, there was an oat festival they had at a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, 20 years later. And I was in a hallway there and seeing all of these former students and colleagues, and teachers, and everybody. It was a smorgasbord of all kinds of people. And I'm talking to people, and all of a sudden, there was a hand on my left shoulder, and I break into tears. And I turn, and it's John Ball. That's how powerful these relationships can be with that kind of experience and intimacy. And there, when I took the CPE at Louisville General, I was assigned to the rehabilitation unit at the hospital. And I walked in the first day there, and there was this woman, apparently had a mild stroke. She was in a wheelchair, in her 60s. And I walked in, and Probably said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the chaplain." She said, "The chaplain?" "Yeah, I'm the chaplain, Chaplain Duncan." She said, "Oh, you're a preacher." I said, "Yes." "Well, you can start praying for us right now," and just dropped her head. And I just intuitively said, "Before I pray with someone, I'd like to know what prayer means to them. Can you share with me what prayer means to you?" And she immediately broke into tears, wheeled a wheelchair around to get some Kleenex off of a table, turned back around with fire in her eyes. She said, "Well, you certainly got to me quick." I said, "How so?" She said, "Because prayer doesn't mean a damn thing to me." And I said, "Can you share with what that means to you?" And then she began to share with me how all the preachers in her rural area, when her husband died, would show up and they wanted to do their thing of praying, reading scripture, but they didn't want to talk to her about her grief. So through that summer and all that I had and all that I learned, and by the way, Roy Woodruff was my supervisor, who was a supervisor in training, who ultimately became the executive director of Pastoral Counseling in the United States. But I decided, because I liked her, I really did. There's something about her that her spirit that I really loved. And so I would go by and see her every day at 4 o'clock before I went home. And she finally said to me one day, we talked about all kinds of things and all the pain that she'd had. She said, "I want to ask you something." I said, "What?" Said, "I noticed that you come to see me every day at 4 o'clock." I said, "That's right." "Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, I decided at 4 o'clock, I'm tired. I've had a long day. I want to spend my time with the person that I enjoy. And so I decided I would see you at 4 o'clock." She said, "Really?" I said, "Really?" And so we came down to the close to the last day on that Friday. She said, "On that Friday and at 4 o'clock, you're going to come see me, aren't you?" I said, "You can count on it." And I went there and I sat down with her and we talked about our relationship. And she broke into tears. She said, "I want you to know something." I said, "What?" She said, "I still haven't been able to pray, but I feel I'm closer than I've ever been." I had never prayed with her. I said, "Well, what about me leading us in prayer now?" "Would you?" She said, "I'll be glad to." And I did. And then I'll never forget, as I was leaving, she said, "Can I tell you one more thing?" I said, "Sure." She said, I was 24 years old. "You're a good looking man. You be careful." That was the beginning, sort of a beginning in many ways of the different levels of experiential psychotherapy. Then also when I went for my CPE unit at Central State Psychiatric Hospital in Louisville, one of the first things that happened to me when I walked in there was patient said was paranoid patient was playing pool and there's evidence to me he was on all kinds of medication. So he said, "Chaplain, you want to play pool?" I said, "Sure, play pool with him." But I felt sorry for him. I let him beat me. And he immediately knew it. And he said, "You just allowed me to beat you, didn't you?" He used a lot of expletives to describe me. I said, "Yes." He said, "I don't appreciate you treating me that goddamn way." I said, you want to do it differently then?" He said, "Right." I said, "Then rack it." He racked them and I ran the table. And he threw the thing down. He said, "Like I said, let that be a lesson to you. From now on, by God, be honest with people. If you're going to be a minister, be honest." I said, "You got it." of God, and I still do. So in all of that, basically, one of the things I learned was how important it was later on to begin to look what Oates talked about in terms of the phenomenological approach to pastoral care. Also, I was there when Samuel Southard decided to leave Southern Seminary. He was going to be my major professor for my THM work, so I was left without anyone. And ultimately, what they decided was to give me to Swan Hayworth, who was on the faculty. And so Swan became my major professor. And Swan had specialties in marriage and family therapy and counseling. And so that was very helpful to me and helped me move into that arena. Also, Swan, when he had his sabbatical, had been able to work out to go to Vienna and be with Viktor Frankl. And so he spent a whole year with Viktor Frankl. At first, Frankl didn't want to have anything to do with him, but gradually they became very good friends, which is the way it was with Swan. And they became best of friends. In fact, they called one another on their birthdays until the day they each died. And so I became interested in Frankl, and I was chaplain at the time also at the rehab center. And so I began to look at ways by which I could do some research and apply logotherapy, which Frankl had developed in my study for my THM thesis. And I did that thesis and had it almost finished when Frankl came to visit Swan and Lowell. And I had the opportunity to be with Frankl for half of a day and have lunch with him and his wife and his daughter and her fiance. It was a glorious time to get to know him and to know the real Frankl, Viktor Frankl. In my study, which was basically experiential, and my asking for the stories of each of the patients that I studied, that they would share their stories about how they felt about their disability. I've been able to come up with, my study was three different kinds of categories: a religion of works, a religion of pleasure, and a religion of faith. The religion of works fit with what Frankl called creative values, action-oriented kinds of values that one has in life. The religion of pleasure fit with the sense of the pleasure principle, the pleasure factors of meaning. And the religion of faith, the attitudinal values. So there's a sense in which, you can begin to look at a religion of works, of pleasure, faith, as that of creation, pleasure, and attitude. That are his attitudinal values that he was talking about. But the main thing I came up with in talking to Frank about, he was asking what I'd come up with in my research. I said, the one thing that I've come up with is that it's impossible, I think, almost to develop an attitudinal value if you don't have a balance between creative values and experiential values. He said, well, can you give me an example? I gave him an example of an engineer who had jumped into a pool and broken his neck and was a paraplegic. And he had his wife and his son would come to visit, but his son would stay downstairs with, I think, grandparents, and his wife would come up and visit. And I asked him one day, how come he didn't have his son to come up to visit? He said, I don't want him to see me like this, not until I can walk out of here. Creative values. And I said to him, whether you can walk or not, your experience as a father to your son is still primary to him. And he doesn't understand, I think, why you don't want to see him. I think it's important for you and for him to be together. And when he did that, he began to improve dramatically in his working on his in therapy, in occupational therapy and physical therapy. He still could not walk out, but he was a much different person. A person with a preoccupation with pleasure that they have no understanding or value in suffering basically continue to feel that somehow all these unpleasant experiences are destroying their lives. But if they can find some creative way, something creative in their life, it can be a way of balancing so they can develop attitude ways. Frankl was excited about that. I said, I can give an example of one you've given. He said, like what? I said, where you write about the old Jewish man whose wife had died, and he came to see you because he was continuing to be in grief. And you asked the old man the question, would it have been better if she had died? If you had died first? And he said, oh no, that would have been awful. She would have been so lonely. And Frankl said, then in other words, her dying first and your living saved her from the pain of the grief that you're experiencing. He said, yes. And then you helped the old man gain a new perspective and a new meaning of his grief. So you gave him a creative value that met with an experiential value and therefore changed his attitude about his suffering. That was an important moment that we had together. I think it fits with what Kierkegaard says, the door of happiness always opens outwards. Also, when I was as I moved into the doctoral program and with Oates, he had me, first of all, he called me when I was at rehab. I was in a staff meeting. Secretary came and said, you have a call. I said, well, I can't take it right now since I'm in staff meetings. She said, it's Dr. Oates. I said, well, by all means, I'll take it. So I went and I took it. And when he said, I have an opportunity for you to be a resident, start your doctoral program and be a resident with psychiatric residents and the University of Louisville School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry, equal to the psychiatrist. And you'll be paid this amount of money for a year and a half to 2 years. And I said, well, how long do I have to think about it? He said, you just had it. So that's how I started my doctoral program. And that was a fantastic experience because Wayne also for 30 years had had a psychiatric aid program with ministers or students from the seminary that were there that learned to become psychiatric aides on the psychiatric unit. And then I also was a group leader for all those psychiatric aides during that particular time. And I was in seminars with the residents and doing therapy with some of the patients in the hospital. And also doing group work and also teaching with social work students. While I was there in the hospital, continuing my work there, I also had a lot of exposure to psychodrama by Marino, where they set up a small stage in a group, and all the patients would be in a group, and they would dramatize a scene. Maybe they'd gone home and mother or dad had done something, or husband had said something or whatever. And I had been in drama in high school, so I would play these different parts. I enjoyed doing all of that. That was a lot of fun. Um, Also, I moved into my doctoral work and I did, you know, all kinds of stuff uh, that Oates assigned to me in terms of readings. Um, One of the things, though, that he had me do was be a representative, a student representative for the Stone Foundation think tank for pastoral ministries for the 1970s that took place in Chicago, Illinois. Um, I think that was in 1969. And I went there, and there were all these giants in the field of pastoral care, social work, psychology, you name it, were there. And it was quite an experience for me as a student. I remember spending a lot of time with William Glasser, the founder of reality therapy. I really enjoyed him, and we spent a lot of time together. Ed Thornton, who was a graduate student of Wayne, was also there. And so we were there for about 3 or 4 days. And also Seward Hiltner was there, and I would talk with him about my thesis and the different things that he had read my master's thesis. Um, in Athens, after I'd finished my degree, I took a job in Athens, Georgia as a chaplain of the hospital and also with the mental health center. And there I moved into all kinds of preventive care and ministry, and I was also involved in learning stuff about neuro linguistic kind of programming that was from Battler and Crime. And also I learned more about Whitaker, which I'll talk about a little bit later. The counseling program that I set up there was one where we did a lot of work with family therapy. And I had the opportunity, because Gus Verdery, who wrote the book with Carl Whitaker on, um, on the family crucible, was also in Atlanta. And I went twice a month for a consultation with him for my marriage and family therapy that I was conducting. And that was a good experience as well. I went into private practice in Athens from 1984 to 98. And it was there that I began to basically implement more of what I was learning in terms of experiential psychotherapy. One of the things that I remember while I was doing that, I was asked to go and speak to a graduation class at the University of Georgia in counseling on existential experiential psychotherapy, which I did. It was about 20 students, a graduate seminar, and had questions. And one, I remember a girl asked, she said, I have a question. I said, what's that? Said, what is the primary thing you feel that one needs to do or learn to become a good therapist? And there was an empty chair, and I said, hold up the chair, and I said, for you to be willing to be in that chair as a patient in therapy for 5 years. And she said, that would be so demeaning. And I said, if you feel that way, what do you think you're going to be communicating to your clients when they come to see you? So one of the things I found with clients through the years has been how honest they can be with me, how wonderful it is that we can move into more of an intimate relationship with one another. I guess the basic distinction that we made at the clinic between closeness and intimacy was in closeness we are trying, I'm more into you and what you are struggling with. In intimacy, I'm more within me and what I'm experiencing inside me with you. I remember my office was next door to Tom Malone, who'd been my therapist and also my consultant on a lot of things. And I always teased him because I knew he was an artist too. He had an art piece of artwork, a real heavy, big piece in his office on the wall. I always teased him, said one of these days, because it was real erotic, it's going to fall off that wall. And I had this woman I was seeing, and all of a sudden I heard this wham against the wall. I said, I'm sorry. I thought maybe something had happened to Tom. I said, I've got to go. And I went out my door and went right through Tom's door. And there was a woman in a chair in his client in the back of the office. Tom was up front picking up this painting, laughing. And he said, this painting fell off the wall. I said, I've been telling you for years that was going to fall off. He said, yeah, I know. And so I said, I'm glad you're okay. And I went on back in. And my client and I had a good laugh about it. And then after I'd finished with my client, Tom said, I'm going to see you tomorrow. I said, okay. He said, I need to tell you something. I said, what? He said, I had the best session with this client that I have ever had after you left. I said, oh, really? And he said, when I came back and sat down with her, she was in tears. And I asked her, can you tell me what's going on? She said, you just don't know. I said, I don't know what. She said, you just don't know how much I would give to have someone in my life that would come and concerned about me like he did when he came through that door for you. That's experiential. The Atlanta Psychiatric Clinic was a wonderful place that I was asked to join. I was in my private practice in Athens from 84 to 88. Bill Phillips, who was the pastoral counselor and the only non-psychiatrist that was on the staff there, kept talking to me about joining the clinic and wanted me to do that. And eventually I began to think that maybe it would be a good thing to do because I was doing full practice in Athens, 30 hours a week. I was doing group, I was doing all kinds of stuff. And I began to think, this is dangerous because I don't have anybody here. I would get consultation when I was there in Atlanta, but I was alone most of the time there in Athens. Had people that were renting space in my building at night, but they weren't there during the day. And so I had many wonderful experiences with clients there in my full-time practice. I remember a woman that came to me and said she wanted to see me because she was lost. I didn't know what that meant. She came to my office. She sat down and she'd hardly said anything whatsoever. She came in the second time, same way, very seldom, would not say anything. Third, and each time she sat in a chair right next to me, pretty close to me. Then I had a couch over here with the windows. She came in the third time and she sat over on the couch and started talking like a magpie, talking about all kinds of things. And I said, can you tell me what's happened? She said, all those years my father sexually abused me. He would call me into his room and I would sit in the chair first. And then he would call me to the bed by the windows. And decided this time I'm not going to do that. Experiential. And I said to her, you have told me something really, really important. And I'm glad you're telling me. And for the next 5 to 6 years, she told me everything that happened, pretty much. And all I can say now, she was a highly proficient professional person. She eventually got out of a very painful, destructive marriage. She married before she retired, and she's now retired, and as far as I know, happy as a lark. The only thing I told her, how disappointed I was that she didn't invite me to give her away, to give the bride away. Also, before I left to go to Atlanta, just before, I remember I got this call from an attorney in Athens. He said, you come highly recommended by people, and my wife and I are in a crisis. I want to come see you right now. This was Thursday afternoon late. And I just finished with a group, and I didn't see people on Friday. I went and played golf Friday with my wife. And I said, well, I can't do that. I'm tired. I'm worn out. It wouldn't be good for you. Wouldn't be good for me. We'll just do it next week. He said, I want to do it tonight. I said, well, I can't. Can you do it the first thing in the morning then? I said, no, I can't do it first thing in the morning. That's my tea time. He said, I don't understand. You drink tea? I said, no, my wife and I play golf. And he said, well, can't you just see us and not do that? I said, I'll tell you what. My wife is a therapist, a nurse and a therapist, marriage and family therapist as well. The two of us will see you and your wife in my office, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll be dressed to go play golf before we go play golf. He said, great. I said, well, wait a minute. You need to know there's a different fee for that. He said, what's that? That's okay. I said, no, you need to know what it is. What is it? I said, we'll see you and your wife at 9 o'clock in the morning before we go play golf for $1,000 cash in the barrelhead before we see you. He said, you're kidding. I said, by God, if you decide that you're going to see me, you'll know I am not kidding you. He said, well, do you have a time next week? And I said, yes. So I set it up with him for the next week. He and his wife came in. They said that. And she said, she was just mad as hell. She said, I didn't want to be here. I said, well, then what in the hell are you doing here? She said, because when I heard what you told that son of a gun, that he didn't allow him to control you like he's trying to control me, I decided I would come. And they worked on that. And believe it or not, they were beautiful people. They worked it out. They still, as far as I know, are married. In Atlanta, the clinic, and I was thinking at the clinic at the time I joined it in 1988. And it's a clinic that was established by Carl Whitaker, Tom Lonis, Dick Felder, and a bunch of other people I mentioned who were on the faculty at Emory University, the School of Department of Medicine, School of Psychiatry. And they had left en masse to establish the clinic down on Peachtree. And eventually they split, and some of them came up to Sandy Springs, where I joined on Roswell Road. At the time that I joined, there were 10 of us, counting me. Pat Malone, Tom Malone, Dick Felder, Ross Cox, Doug Kramer, who had studied under Whitaker in Wisconsin, Steve Howard, Bill Phillips, Ron Milestone, Craig Johnson, then me. It was a powerful group, and it was a family experience of a family together, learning together, working together. We had all of our families that we got to know one, all of our families. And in one sense, our families would show up at the clinic from time to time because they had all these uncles. The only thing we didn't have is women. That never worked out because they didn't want to pay the overhead so much because it was more than they wanted to pay. But I remember my son Keith, who was at Georgia Tech, and he would come to the clinic because he loved to be there and bounce up against everybody and find out what was going on and talk to them about himself and what he was doing at school, all these kinds of things. So they were very, very important to him. It was true of other kids. Basically, we would do things that there was bar mitzvahs or this or that, whatever, we were always involved. Also, I remember Bill Phillips was seeing a client. He had this family that was coming in. He needed to see them, and he was finishing up with her, and she came out. She was still crying. She was still upset. I happened to have an empty hour, and I saw her. I went over and sat down with her, and I said, "You seem to be having a bad time." And she began to express what was going. She was talking about how that she said Dr. Phillips is very good, very helpful, and everything. He helps me get in touch with all kinds of things, but sometimes it's overwhelming. I said, "I hear you," and I sat there with her for an hour. I told Bill afterwards he owed me for an hour, but we teased one another about that. But we also went on. Make sure I'm not going over my time. Um, the clinic would go on retreats twice a year, in the fall and the spring. And we would be all together. We would play golf together. We'd play cards together. We would have dinner together. We'd see. And also at the clinic, we had someone we paid to come fix our meals, and we would all eat in the basements. So nobody had to leave the clinic, and we would all be eating together, sharing together, getting consultations with one another all along the way. It's sort of like it was constant psychotherapy experientially going on. One thing that I've experienced while I was at the clinic was also being introduced to Georgia Baptist. It was at Georgia Baptist that I began to do some supervision. Lee Conver was one that called me and asked me if I would come and begin to supervise and teach in the Pastoral Counseling division. And also was asked to begin to do some work. Gene asked me to do some work, supervision of residents in the CPE side. So I was involved in all kinds of ways that way with Lee and Don and Gene and Nancy Paris and Gloria White was significant for us in our CP program because she was an Enneagram, and I had her over to give Enneagram workshops with my staff, and it just took off. All of them were doing that. Marriage and family, I got into Max was talking about the D-Min program and the supervision students in the D-Min program at Southern Seminary, and that was wonderful to do. All of that led me to all kinds of ways of experience. I can't even imagine. It kind of blows my mind about the different experiences. And then when the clinic was over in 95, I went to a Georgia Marriage and Family Therapy um, meeting. I believe it was in, down here at St. Simon's, where Richard Schwartz was there for internal family therapy system that he was introducing. And as he introduced it, I found myself fascinated with all of the sense of all the different protectors and all the different things that he was talking about, and managers and the firefighters, and how he would honor each part as trying to do something to protect the self. And I thought, this is totally, fully experiential. And I remember particularly how he worked with a military person, a Marine who was grieving his brother's, who was a Marine's death, and how he showed how, in working with this man, he asked the man, he said, I understand that your brother died in Vietnam. And he said, yes, and I've never really grieved anything. His wife got him into therapy because he was unable to deal with feelings and emotions with her. And so what they did was Schwartz began to talk to him about that and said, what about with your parents? He said, I haven't been very good with my parents because I went to the funeral and I wasn't good with them. Why was that? Because I still had my uniform on. I was a sailor Marine. So he worked with them to ask him, can you go inside and ask that part of you that has the protector uniform, if it'd be all right to take it off and put it in another room and you talk to me about your brother's death. And he went inside and he asked the part. He said, the part says it's okay. And Schwartz said, that's great. Would you then ask him to take the uniform and put it in the other room? And he said he has. And when he did, this man broke into tears from the top of his head to the tip of his toes. And I've had that experience with people since then with this in my own practice, where I was able to do that in a way where it would be very, very meaningful. And it went back to my own history, because I remember talking with Tom one day and he was saying, Franklin, one thing you need to do is you need to give up your anger. And I remember I exploded at him. I said, you're full of crap, Tom. I'm not giving up my anger. It's the way I've protected myself my whole life. He said, he laughed. He said, I know, but it will not give you what you really want. And when he said that, everything changed in me. I could feel it all the way to my toes. Because I really wanted to be loved and love people in a more authentic. These are the kind of things about experiential psychotherapy that I think are meaningful to me. I hope they've been meaningful to you. The primary thing behind it all for me is what my Professor Wayne Oates talked about in terms of phenomenological pastoral care of psychotherapy. That is, listening to the story of the patient or the person and allowing them to share their story. And when you do that, you find a way, hopefully, to connect and begin to realize that protectors are not there to be fought with, but to be honored. Their defenses are there as a way by which they're trying to find the way to more wholeness. when I sat with someone and I experienced that holy of holies with them and where I see the major changing, I know this is what it's all about. I close with one story I've shared before, but it was with a woman who was referred to me who was severely depressed, had been put in the hospital, and a physician which referred her to me came in and she said to me, began to find out that she was the child of two alcoholics. Then when she was 14, she got pregnant with a man and she married him. He was an alcoholic. And she had two or three children, and she was constantly trying to work and make, and with her lousy marriage that she had, she couldn't make it work. And the depression was a part of all that. And what she said to me one time in our session, she said, "You know, something I would like to do that I've never done." I said, "What's that?" She said, "Sometimes I'd like to be able to go in a field of grass, tall grass, run out in it, lay down in it, and just roll in it like a child." And I kept telling her, I said, "Well, why don't you do that?" And every time I say her, I said, "Have you done that yet?" And she hadn't. And one day, honest to God, she came in and she was totally different, more alive, and her eyes were more alert. Everything was different. And I said to her, "What's happened?" She said, "I did it." I said, "You did what?" She said, "Well, when I was coming home from work the other day, it was a spring day and it was a beautiful day and there was tall grass and the wind was gently blowing this grass. And I stopped the car. I got out. I went through the fence. I got out in the middle of the field and I rode and I rode and I rode. And haven't felt the same since." I said, "Hallelujah. I can tell it's done." And from then on, her depression got better. Are there any questions or anybody wants to ask? I've already finished my time.
Franklin, they're in an awed stupor right now. I'm looking at them. And we love you. And I can say without any doubt, you were the key supervisor to me in the movement from the person that I was to the person I wanted to become. And now I get to have a vocation and have a family, and it's all meaningful because of the honesty and intimacy I'm able to practice that with, thanks to your gift to me. And I don't know how you did that except for being you. And that's what we've been talking about, how to be you. So I don't have a question. I'm just expressing my personal gratitude for my relationship with you. But before we shift, any thoughts, anything that Franklin said? Go
All
ahead,
of you, no, I want to say that all of you and all of the relationships that I've had through the years with you and other people have grown me too. It's not just one way.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, then what we'll do, Franklin, only because folks may want to come up and talk to the owl, which is our device here that we're seeing through. We'll take just a quick break if you want to get a drink, stretch your legs. I'm thinking 5 minutes, Albert.
Sure.
And Dr. Davis will pick it up in about 5 minutes.
Right, all right.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Franklin, it's Terry. Hi.
Hey, Terry.
Good to see you. The only bad thing about this is I can't hug you this way, but glad to see you. How much golf are you still playing golf?
Yes.
You ran out? Yeah, okay, well, that makes
Seems
me
like
happy.
Fran's playing more than me, but lovely at it.
Well, makes me happy. I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Hey Franklin, Ed,
Hey, Ed.
how you, sir?
All right, it's good to see you.
I'm glad to see you. How does it feel to feel 85 or 86?
Huh?
How does it feel to feel 85 or 86?
It's old, feels older.
I got you a t-shirt I'll send to you. It says getting old is getting old.
That's right. You got it.
You doing okay?
Yeah, doing all right.
All right.
For
Good
my
to see
age, I'm
you.
doing all right.
Thank you for your words. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Give that wonderful wife of yours hello for me.
Say again?
Give your wonderful wife a hug from me.
I will do
Go
that.
ahead.
I'll do that. I watched the Masters the other day and I thought about you.
Yeah,
Did you watch it?
I sure did.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Well, and I appreciate you teaching me how to play that game too.
Okay.
Take care of yourself.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Hey Franklin, it's Elaine. How are you?
Hello, Lane. It's good to
Yes,
see you.
good to see you. I was hoping you were going to be here in person.
I'm glad.
I like your sideways big old hugs. So I like that. So I'll just give
Yeah,
you
I'm
a
sorry I
virtual
couldn't do
one.
that too. Yeah, I miss it. You doing
Yeah,
all right?
yeah. I'm doing really good. Yeah, I've got 4 grandsons and then a granddaughter on the way. So I'm
Wow.
busy and everybody's doing really well. Yeah, thank you.
That's
How's your
great.
wife? How's
Fran's doing fine. She's doing really well. She's
Steph?
active,
Hi.
active as she can be for 80 years old.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you're still are you still in Jekyll? Is that where you are?
That's where I am.
Okay, all right.
I'm in my,
Well,
I'm in my kitchen right now.
if I come that way, I'll call you, okay? Maybe we can have lunch or
All
something.
right. We'd love to see you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm directing traffic, Franklin.
It's what?
In traffic, but I did play golf last Friday morning, but I didn't today because of playing with this ensemble. But next Friday morning. You still playing some? Franklin, are you still playing some?
Oh, yeah. I still play about twice a week, 3 times. I play at it, only 9 holes.
Uh-huh. Sure.
I played less during the hot weather because I can't stand the heat.
No, I understand that. The way I play now is I play the way I want to. I don't have to play by their rules. I can play by mine. So I'll leave my son after 9 and say, you have a great time. I had all the fun I can have. I
That's right.
understand that.
That letter he signed this week.
I will. I want to get gold in this year. I can tell him to do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you were supervisee, okay, and so. And so what was it then? Well, I was going to keep you. And it was time, I felt like it was time for me to give it up. Oh, okay. So I waited to do it. Love me, and all me. I was gonna say, there was like 2 personal, we go, oh, never forget.
I don't know where the thing is. Franklin, do you ever hear from Amy Green? You ever talk to Amy?
Not lately. She came here to the island a couple of years ago, but that's about last I saw her. She'll every now and then send me a text or email.
Did you know she left the clinic early because she got POTS?
Huh?
Did you know she left Cleveland Clinic? She retired earlier than she meant to because she was diagnosed with POTS.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so she said she just had no energy and couldn't move, and basically her cardiologist told her she had to quit. So she went through a lot of grieving because she was so identified with work. And so she's back. So she's in DC, I think DC, but she's near her son who's the physician and grandchildren. And she's I think she's starting to write some again. But yeah, I hear from her every now and then.
Yeah, I don't know why she didn't tell me that, but she just She
Well-
came in, when she came through here, I kept thinking there was something she's not telling me. But
Yeah.
she didn't tell me.
I think she was embarrassed at first because she was just
That's
so
why.
driven. She was just
Right.
so, and I mean, it's obviously not her fault, but
I think it reminded her too much of her mother.
well, I can see that too. Yeah.
I think that brought all kinds of stuff, I'm sure.
Yes, we get what we resist. Isn't there a famous saying like that? You get what you resist.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you.
Hey Franklin, Greg Samples, good to see you. Been way too long.
I can't see who it is.
Greg Samples,
Oh, yeah, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing, hanging right in there for somebody about to turn 80.
Are you still working?
Just a tiny bit, and actually fixing to move to Memphis, where my youngest son is. So when we move there, the license will go away, and so I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna do about that piece.
Want to know, it's great to see you again.
Oh, thank you.
So appreciate all the contributions you've made to us through the years and tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm in Star. Where I grew up. It was when the Gus Verdery Savannah. I live out there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 100 miles south.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that real.
Yeah.
Will and I grew up about a lot.
Yeah.
The country boy.
No,
Road boy.
well, I know it's like a little country boy mafia here, you, the Bruce. Then it becomes summer. Yeah, I know he's in it too.
Yeah, we are the exciting folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Got that back on this one, was self-care thing. I love nature, but I don't get out as much as I like to, you know, I mean, I wish I had a home place to go back to or a place on.
That I'll have on my, first we live in family, so she ate from maybe lunch.
Yeah.
Paula, can you hear me?
Hey,
Huh?
You know, we had a special group there.
Paula?
I just want to make sure.
This is Murphy. I can't, your speaker's not on.
Murphy, can you hear me?
Hey, Doll,
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How
Not sure.
about you enjoying your retirement?
Yeah, man, I work a few days a week.
Oh, you still do?
You?
I was speaking to Brenda the other day and we mentioned you.
Yeah, Brenda, she doing okay?
Yes, you know her friend Michael died.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had moved to South Carolina to be with his sisters because his health was so poorly. But anyway, she's doing good. She's down there near her family.
Oh, good. Oh, so she's not in Dalton anymore.
No, she moved a few years ago and down there near them. And she has some other friends from years ago. And so she's also trying to take better care of her health and everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Murphy, it's always good to see you.
Yes, thank you for keeping me up on things. Let me ask you this. What about Jerry?
Well, Gary's having his challenges.
Yeah.
Having his challenges.
We got a letter.
And we got a letter from Jerry that Albert's gonna read.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
good.
Yeah, but thank you for asking about it. He's
Yeah.
still living, coming.
Hey, what?
He's still living and coming.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And Joanne died. Did you know Joanne died?
Yeah, I knew that. The last time I was at your place, I got to see Jerry when we were there, when he was there.
Good to see you, buddy.
Okay, Joel. Paula, your speaker's not on. Can you see this?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to
Maybe
do
that.
You speak?
that?
You're so, you're
Sit down.
Oh, we thought that they were two girls.
Okay. That's wonderful.
All right, everybody back up here and get on, let's go.
When you look, you know.
Very similar.
At least I'm not driving back. I gotta go back.
Well, I work.
No.
I think they're-
we had talked about
Yes, I was.
that.
Reminds me of the
So
hospital.
that was gonna be second, so we gotta remember the spark.
Have you ever been?
Spark
Have you
health
been?
center.
I'll let you know.
I got it.
Okay. I gotta know where it is.
It's so much cheaper.
Yeah,
$100 and putting tax and everything.
yeah, that's right. I think ours was like the only one.
Anyway, it's, anyway,
I wasn't gonna.
I didn't want to drive right back and not need to, and so I'm gonna see some friend tomorrow for lunch or something.
Yeah. I was hoping, you never know what happened.
Should have done it last Thursday.
I was saying, I thought, why not?
Her daughter down with cancer. Yeah, she got cervical cancer about a year ago.
Are we ready to rock and roll?
I think so.
Go, come on.
And so then there was some issues, but she said she could establish a character.
I wanted to bring greetings to you all from Jerry Jenkins. And some of you that don't know Jerry was our executive director of the Pastoral Counseling Center for a number of years, and Albert is a friend of Jerry, and Albert visits Jerry every week. But Jerry wrote this note to you all, and I wanted to read it to you. It says, pastoral counselors, psychotherapists, to my friends at this reunion, I hope that you all are well and enjoying each other. I am grateful for our work together, and I miss you. I value the memories we share of our investments of pastoral care psychotherapy, and I hope you will continue our mission in the future. What you give to others will remain with all of us as friends forever. My love is real for each of you, Jerry Jenkins.
Oh, thank you.
Jerry's incoming, and he wished he could be here, but he's just unable to be here. So I'm introducing to you all Albert Davis. Those of you who don't know Albert, he's a friend of chaplains, a friend of pastors, a friend of congregations. He understands the care of the soul. And he's a friend of ours, and we're looking forward to your comment.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me. And hello, friends. I've been asked to speak about the legacy of Gus Verdery, and that has morphed, excuse me, into a much deeper meaning of his life, which is friendship. The legacy of Gus Verdery goes back a long way to his doctorate degree in spiritual counseling and his finding this a need in what at that time was Georgia Baptist Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. That was before the medical center. Gus had begun a pastoral counseling training program in the midst of his service as the one original chaplain in an independent church-owned medical clinic. Later, that clinic grew to be actually a hospital with a small medical staff, which later grew to be a hospital, huge hospital medical center. The original sponsor was Reverend Lynn Broughton at the Baptist Tabernacle on Lucky Street in downtown Atlanta. And he started a small 3-bed rented house nearby for a clinic combined with nursing training. And when asked, why do we need to start a clinic? Brother Broughton replied, because Baptists get sick too. Well, Gus was first hired to be the chaplain, a very forward concept for the famous downtown tabernacle. Gus's mission was clearly to provide biblical and spiritual support for patients. Later, he was to recruit new chaplains that he could find acceptable. He was the first to realize that professional direction of pastoral staff would support the connections of church and medicine. Part of his success was the incorporation of the chaplain services, which required recruitment of ministers dedicated to support those sick Baptists. Not only did he train other chaplains to join him, but he created a new independent training service department at the hospital for the purpose of attracting ministers who were dedicated to psychotherapy. Here he was combining the pastoral care services with the need to connect body and mind. It was then said that the Baptists in their minds can get sick too. This work was long and arduous, knowing that many in the executive framework of Georgia Baptist Convention were not knowledgeable nor interested in the underlying necessity of pastoral care for sick people. However, Gus's efforts were rewarded by connections he made with other ministers, nurses, physicians, surgeons, pediatricians, obstetricians, and hospital executives. Gus was a remarkable man, able to relate with Baptist leaders at the Georgia Convention level, as well as the Southern Baptist Convention bosses. He was responsible for convincing many of them that the time had come for pastoral care to include those sick of mind as well as body. The connections he made were tremendously significant, and not only were his friendships professional, but personal and emotional in their existence. His ability to make friends extended to hospital personnel, nursing school staff, other ministers in Greater Atlanta, and especially to those who were attracted to his model of pastoral care. And that's you. In the meantime, the hospital had grown in its capacity to care for sick people throughout Atlanta and the state of Georgia, who were referred in for the excellent treatment provided in many of the Georgia Baptist Medical Center's specialties. The nursing school had grown to be the largest in the state. The Department of Obstetrics delivered more babies than any other private hospital. And psychiatry was finally instituted in a special department utilizing a whole floor in the Louis B. Newton Hospital Ancillary building. Gus was the one, by the way, who started that psychiatric unit. As the hospital grew in its expanding statewide medical referrals, the pastoral training program grew in likewise renown. Gus became an administrator, a teacher, and a well-known icon for his exceptional model of caregiving. Many ministers came to him for guidance and learning and giving and providing a therapeutic concept of personal growth, which he built into a deeper connection with others of friendship. The most exceptional of those were chosen to join the pastoral care department at 300 Boulevard, and that's the picture of that old house. Service heads included doctors Jerry Jenkins and Don Cavanis. Of interest, that house was purchased from the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and for many years it was the home of their AME Church Georgia bishop. For our purposes, after renovation, it housed 6 permanent staff members as well as rooms for group meetings, case supervisions, therapy sessions, and offices for administrative staff. It became an icon of learning and reverence for many of us, as well as a happy meeting ground for our weekly clinical services. In addition, it afforded Gus his rose garden space in the front yard. Although Gus and Eleanor never had children of their own, they created family in their professional and spiritual callings. Brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, even grandchildren, some like us. Their ability to connect spiritually and emotionally provided the development of many friendships, which proved extremely valuable in the development of the pastoral care service, as well as our own individual relationships. And next, I'd like to tell you just a bit about my own personal history with Gus. During the Vietnam War, and I'm going to talk fairly fast with this. If I get too fast, if you can't follow me, please raise your hand. During the Vietnam War, I was privileged to be promoted from medical director of the Regional Psychiatric Hospital at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida to begin a new treatment service for alcoholism. Until that time, and this was in 71, I think. Yeah. Until that time, the United States Air Force active duty personnel were immediately discharged if their medical record included the diagnosis of alcoholism. The discharge was that of a general discharge, which meant no future benefits. The U.S. Air Force standard was, there are no U.S. Air Force staff with an alcohol problem, in quotes. Well, however, I was assigned to study and join a previously secret USAF treatment program called Therapeutic Community. There had been an undercover alcohol treatment program at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Akron, Ohio, by Colonel Dick Scabetta, who had managed to monthly admit a select number of patients with alcoholism without any official record of their attendance. He kept careful weekly follow-up in confidential records for 5 years and determined after careful analysis outcomes that 92% remained in recovery. Now, that was the highest achievement ever recorded for an alcohol treatment center in the United States. So after the results were published, then the Air Force had a huge alcohol problem, and all regional psychiatric facilities like mine were mandated to begin similar alcohol treatment programs based on the Wright-Patterson model of therapeutic community. Well, I spent a rewarding month studying with Dr. Scabetta, and then took home the tools to create a similar program at Eglin. After my, quote, honorable discharge, I was recruited to begin a similar civilian hospital program in the private Peachtree Parkwood Hospital in Atlanta. I don't know if you all may remember that old hospital that was there. The combination of Parkwood, where Dave Davis was the chief, and then Peachtree, part of it. It was an older hospital that had moved from downtown Atlanta out there on Briarcliff. And then I got to be the medical director there. Until that time, though, they had had really a good treatment center, but only limited to detox program. What a challenge. Peachtree Hospital had for many years provided a successful medical treatment program of only 3 to 5 days, but I was to use that very system to be only the beginning step of an intensive recovery process lasting 1 month. The continuing program was a therapeutic community based on multidisciplinary intensive treatment processes. You can imagine the nurses and medical staff were well trained to provide a safe and medical tight detox treatment. But the idea of up for community meeting, group therapy twice a day, occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, and evening prayers together, no. The nurses were very, very resistive, revolted, threatened to quit. They were concerned for safety and control. Their patients were there to, quote, stay in their beds to prevent falls. Nurses would bring meds as ordered, meals 3 times a day, big pens as needed, but no getting together to prevent an uprising. Patients were not to congregate and precipitate a riot. Well, I realized that we desperately needed therapy for the staff to be able to act as a cohesive group. And where would we find such a leader? Some 40-odd psychiatrists and psychologists at Peachtree Parkwood Hospital staff were well known to us, and we were to them. So we had to find somebody, I had to find somebody outside the box.
Yeah.
for a therapist who could work with all of our disciplines? Well, our social worker, Charlene, gave me the answer. She said, I know just the person. It's my Sunday school teacher, Gus Verdery. Well, after a 2-hour lunch meeting at the Georgia Baptist Medical Center staff dining room with Gus, who was the chaplain director there, he agreed. He would come out to Peachtree Hospital every Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Our day staff would rotate with the evening staff to attend, and I paid him out of my stipend. It was an extraordinary experience for 3 years to have staff, including me, all on the same team for a true therapeutic community. 3 years later, after his success with my Peachtree Hospital staff, Gus hired me to move my practice to Georgia Baptist and began there a psychiatric service, which the oldest, largest private hospital in the state of Georgia had never before had. He would obtain a separate locked unit of 12 beds, just enough to make it cost effective, for a separate psych service. And I could be the medical director and chairman of the hospital's new psychiatric department and the psychiatric consultant for the School of Nursing and the consultant for the Pastoral Counseling service. About that time, well, it gets more. Thank you. About that time, though, I was going through a very tragic, painful divorce, and I became very depressed. In fact, at one time, I had to move out of our big old house on Habersham Road, and the wonderful real estate lady had found an apartment that she thought would be good in the Landmark apartment building. I don't know if you know that high-rise apartment building on Cortlandt Street. And she couldn't wait. She showed me the apartment and said, just go out on the balcony and look at that beautiful view of the downtown skyscraper. And I walked out on the balcony and I started backing up. And I thought, one martini and I would be over the railing. So I had also scheduled for that evening a meeting with Gus Verdery to talk about this new concept that I might join him and come to Georgia Baptist. So I kept the appointment with Dr. Verdery late that afternoon in his office, and in desperation, I cried. I told Gus that I'm not sure I can make it. He looked me in the eyes and he took my hand and he said, Albert, I know you, and you are strong enough to make it with any choice you make. And I will be here with you.
Wow.
Well, after such a transformative meeting later that night, I wrote Gus a thank you note and a letter, sharing with him the positive impact he had had on my life, even though I was just one of the therapeutic members after the 3 years with him. And I wanted him to know that if ever I were able to have another marriage, and if we were able to have children, and if we had a boy, I would name him Gus.
Wow.
And we did. And that's his picture. With his family, his second son is in that picture with me and Gus at the beach. And that son is named Thomas. He's named for me. But Gus carries the name Gus. I just wanted to say, in our work together, the imprint he had on my life was so intense. In our work together, we have become best friends. And he did that with almost everybody who would let him. He had a kind of connectedness that was so real, and it was moving. I mean, it was life-changing for so many of us. Gus Verdery developed a strong allegiance to those with whom he worked. His connectedness was based on work experience, intellectual respect, and emotional acceptance. He valued us as friends, you included. When Gus retired after 30 years as Georgia Baptist Medical Center chaplain, he did so at age 59, just in time to join the Southern Baptist Foreign Mission Board for his long-held calling to serve as an overseas missionary. He had previously asked me to join him for a summer in his foreign mission assignment, wherever that might be, and I could just hear the drums of Africa in the background. However, at his age, the Foreign Mission Board would only send him to teach at the Baptist Seminary in Ruschlikon, Switzerland. In the meantime, I had moved my practice to Valdosta, Georgia to fulfill my own calling for rural medicine. But we gathered the family together for a summer trip to Switzerland. And after Gus and Eleanor settled into their separate roles, his as professor and hers as bookkeeper for the seminary, we began plans looking forward to a visit with them in the summer of 1984. On the first day after an overnight flight, Eleanor met us at the airport and said that Gus was not well after the onset of severe pain and that there was an appointment already made for that afternoon with the Swiss University Medical School professor, Dr. Siegenthaler. And could I go with them? Well, of course. So while Carolyn got the children and grandmother settled into the seminary dormitory, off to downtown Zurich, I went with Gus and Eleanor and the seminary dean. And after several hours of examination and testing, Dr. Siegenthaler said that Gus should go back to his, quote, native land for intensive treatment. And Gus said, "No, I'm here for 5 years." Dr. Siegenthaler shook his head and said, this was life-threatening. He said this to me primarily because knowing I was a physician, he said, this is life-threatening illness. It will move through the nervous system from the feet to the legs, to the abdomen, to the lungs, to the brain. And the diagnosis was polyarteritis nodosa, which is a relatively rare autoimmune disease. And the treatment would involve many challenging, significant steps. He then realized that Gus was committed to his position as missionary, and he called for the administrator, who explained that the hospital required a cash deposit for any patient to be admitted other than those with a Swiss covered insurance. And that, excuse me, and that the admission deposit would be $10,000. I had one blank check in my wallet, having been allotted to take with me by my bookkeeper, Lucy. It worked, and we were in. As you might have suspected, I've never really been careful with money, and in the past had sometimes forgotten to enter the stubs in the checkbook. So Lucy had said, for this trip, I'm only going to give you one blank check, and that's all it took. That night, back in the seminary dormitory, I called Dr. Harrison Reeves, Gus's former internist at Georgia Baptist Medical Center, about where would be the best place to take Gus for his treatment. And after telling him all the details of the afternoon exams and the resulting consultation, he said, Albert, you are at Mecca. And Dr. Siegenthaler is a world-renowned specialist in autoimmune disease. Stay. And so we did. And thank goodness Lucy had given me that one blank check. Now, 3 months later at Gus's funeral in Decatur First Baptist Church, where the counseling center is named the Verdery Spiritual Life Growth Center, Carolyn and I and our son sat with Eleanor together with hundreds of other friends of his before she returned to Switzerland to complete their 5-year commitment to the Foreign Mission Board. Today, Eleanor is alive and well at 102, and would welcome your visit with her at her retirement home in Park Springs, which is located in Stone Mountain. She gave permission to share this picture with you, which we're going to pass out. Have you already seen the pictures? Okay, good. These are the pictures of Gus that I took of Gus's portrait in her dining room in Park Springs. We were able to get enough copies of this to be billfold size, if you like it. Looking back now, 40 years of my life, Gus Verdery is one of my best friends. Not only did he save my life, he continues to give me purpose. Today, another of one of my best friends, Jerry Jenkins, is in the nursing home in Celebration Village in Cumming. I get to see him for weekly visits. We've been writing together some stories about the journey into Alzheimer's. That's his title for it. He too would enjoy your visit. Gus taught me you are strong enough to do what you choose to do, and I will be with you. That gift is still real within me. You are not alone, and that's what friends are for. And now you've heard my efforts at personal friends, and here's the reason why it makes sense. The science of friendship, and that was the other subject I'm supposed to cover. But I'm going to deviate from my notes here and just show you the textbook. This was a textbook that I was given several months ago, and it is entitled Friendship. And the subtitle is The Evolution, Biology, and Extraordinary Power of Life's Fundamental Bond, Friendship. I don't want to leave this up here just so you could look at it if you'd like, or to borrow it, or if you want to get a copy of it.
Dr. Davis, who's the author?
Pardon?
Author?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lydia Dinsworth. Lydia Denworth, Denworth. She's an editor of Scientific American and Psychology Today, and she also does extensive scientific work supported by the Alfred Sloan Foundation, which was just mentioned. Her subtitle is The Evolution, Biology, and Extraordinary Power of Life's Fundamental Bond, Friendship. And that's why I'll be for today. Well, just let me share some of what I found in my readings. And I'm not going to go into all of the details that she outlined. She quotes 30 some odd pages in her references in the back of the book of research studies that have been done, and she cited the author and the study itself and where and when and so forth. But I do want to tell you, as an 85-year-old physician and with 60 plus years of practice in psychiatry, I realized that one mark of mental health, in fact, physical health as well, is the extent to which one person has invested a loving commitment with other people. There are many types of love. Most people think emotional attachment of a romantic nature, or maternal love, or paternal love, or love of music or sports or fishing, and love of country and love of God. A professional definition of love, and my best one for friendship, is unconditional acceptance. And that attachment has proven in my practice that the effects of loneliness, depression, anxiety, and even the severe illnesses of psychoses are less severe when the patient has meaningful friendships. In fact, it's been proven that physical illnesses of the heart, metabolic, and endocrine systems are less impairing in the presence of a person who invests in friendships with other people. Research has even proven that one effect of friendship connections in the long run provides better health and longer life. So I'm going to skip through a lot of the referral to the studies that she quotes. She just quotes one famous person after another, including Mother Teresa, who actually said that loneliness is one of the worst states of life. All of this is about famous people and how hard they have worked, going all the way back to Aristotle. And the fact that the Scottish philosopher Adam Smith was the first to recognize empathy and what that meant in terms of sharing how we feel and how the other person feels with us. William James studied. He said, human beings are born into this little span of life, of which the best part is its intimacies and friendships. Emil Durkheim was the first to connect the bond of friendship to mental health. It just goes on and on about all these wonderful people who have developed their whole careers focused on friendship and the bond and the strength of that bond for us personally to carry. Hans Selye developed the concept that stress equals the body's reaction to any demand for change. He said the most common source of stress for humans is other humans. Stress is seen as either adaptive in the case of an emergency or pathological, as in the chronic trials and tribulations of a stressful relationship. Social connectedness or lack thereof equals a major risk for health. Social isolation is a predictor of mortality. These are all proven in the book with studies. In 1980, William James was the first to say that feelings are connected to physiology, that is, the functions of the physical body. Relationships alter physical responses to stress. Mother Teresa is the one who said loneliness and the feeling of being unwanted are the most terrible of poverty in life. Social isolation is the flip side of social integration. John Cacioppo found in a recent MacArthur study that 1/2 of Americans reported loneliness or sometimes feeling alone. He founded a new field called social neuroscience, and its research revealed that social networks protect against cognitive decline and dementia, and vice versa. Therefore, health follows a social involvement gradient. Our DNA strands have protective caps on each end, and the length of this and the length shortens with each stressful DNA cell reproduction and the relative level of stress experienced. It is a handy clock for telling biological age compared to chronological age. People with good relationships have longer telomeres. Dr. Stephen Cole said, lonely people are really struggling all the way down to their genes. And human value of our existence can be grouped into the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. The famous medical long-term research study, the Framingham Heart Study in Massachusetts, followed for greater than 50 years, tens of thousands of people and their many health experiences, and found that happiness was the greatest in those with the most social connections. For us, friends, hence the old saying, if you smile, the whole world smiles with you. The bottom line of neuroscience research is understanding friendships, biology of evolution, which brings us closer to knowing fully what it means to be human. If we spend our lives connecting with other people, there's a purpose it serves for our species that's worth understanding, hence neuroscience. Research has found for most people, life actually improves after age 50, and age tends to work in favor of happiness. So I think we're on the right track. Dr. Chopik at Michigan State studied over 70,000 adults and found valuing family was important, and valuing friendship became increasingly important with age. Those who did have higher levels of health, happiness, and a subjective well-being across the lifespan. The so-called blue zones, exceptional spots about the world where more people live to be 100 than anywhere else, were found to have increased mature connections and friendships. A recent Harvard study about good relationships, they keep us happier and healthier. 3 main lessons were learned. 1, social connections are really good for us and loneliness kills. 2, quality of relationships matter more than quantity. And 3, good relationships protect our bodies and our brains. That is, conflict is bad for us, and good, warm relationships are protective. The long-term Harvard study recently completed of more than 720 men followed through their lifetime of greater than 75 years reported the only thing that really matters in life is their relationships to other people. My take on all this is that good relationships, friends, keep us healthier, period. Well, I congratulate you for listening to my summary of this 252-page textbook. and share with you now, and since you are now experts on the positive scientific meaning of human relationships, I challenge each of you to consider working on building more and deeper friendships. And to start, just look around you. And one more thing, I'm reminded of a story that I heard at the opening celebration of the Counseling Center at the Episcopal Cathedral of St. Philip, where I was the medical director. And it's told by a renowned seminary professor in his sermon that night, Father John Claypool, who gave an old narrative first attributed to Lauren Wisely, scientist and poet, entitled The Starfish Story. I'm sorry, The Starfish Thrower. And I know most of you have heard this story perhaps many times. However, I'm hoping that you will try to imagine a new meaning and a different connection with the starfish. Once upon a time, and I'm going to need you to pass those out.
Yes.
You can do it later or whenever you like. That now is fine.
Okay.
The story goes, once upon a time on a remote island, early in the morning after a very stormy night, an old man was walking, as was his usual custom at daybreak, down the deserted beach. He saw a wasteland of debris, some of it broken shells, seaweed, and to his wonder, hosts of starfish stuck in the sand as the tide receded. Then he saw farther down the beach a human figure who appeared to be from the distance to be dancing. As he came closer, he realized it was a young man who was bending down to the sand and then reaching out and up and throwing something gently, but way out into the sea. And as the old man came closer, he called out, "Young man, what are you doing?" And the young man, startled by the stranger's approach, blurted out, "I'm throwing starfish into the ocean." Then the old man, looking around him and down the expanse of starfish-fluttered beach, said, "Young man, why are you throwing starfish into the ocean?" The young man patiently answered, "Well, they washed ashore in the storm last night, and when the tide goes back out and the sun comes up, they will die, unless I throw them back into the sea." "Young man, look at all these miles of coast with starfish everywhere. You can't possibly make a difference." Then the young man bent down again and lifted up another starfish and sailed it ever so far out to the sea beyond the breakers. For that one, it makes a difference. Well, the challenge is to find your starfish and use the courage that belongs to you to lift it up and let it soar. The difference you make will determine whom you meet, what you give, and where you go to find that friend. Dear friends, problems are bound to occur as we age. Storms come and go. Culling through the debris, the smelly seaweed, and the broken shells of life is not pleasant. No human life is without its difficult changes in our later years. But to use our courage to find a friend will make a difference. And now let's close with an old prayer, which goes back to 1881 by Henri Ariel. And this is a quote: "Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of friends who make the journey with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. And may the blessings of God, who made us and who loves us and who travels with us, be with you now and forevermore. Amen."
Amen. Amen.
One more thing, I would like to give you a small token to remember this evening and all it means to us to find friends. And that's a little starfish remembrance piece to take home with you. Please find a prominent place for it, a bedside table, your desk, breakfast table, or hang it from your rearview mirror. But let it remind you of our challenge of friendship. Thank you.
Amen.
Any thoughts, questions, reflections for Dr. Davis?
Well, thank you very much for letting me come. It's always great to see all of you.
Very much. You know, Albert, I think the thing that I'm reminded of is that it doesn't even have to be a lifelong friendship, a long friendship, just how certain people coming into your lives at a certain time, saying something can be just profoundly influencing.
Yes.
So, yeah,
That's the
thank you for
quality.
reminding me of that. Yeah.
That's the quality they were talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. And making the most of it too. Yeah. Thank you.
Albert, why do we have to be so old before we learn things like that?
I'm still learning, so I hope that we can keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We've got some pictures up here if you'd like to see them of the old 300 George Avenue house. And this is our son Gus and his son Thomas, and a childhood picture of Gus, as well as some when Gus was baptized in the little Episcopal church in Valdosta when we lived down there. Gus and Eleanor came and Gus helped with the baptism. So these are all pictures that I thought you might enjoy seeing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm overwhelmed. Thank you for coming. I think this went beautifully. And I just have to use the bully pulpit to wrap us up with this thing, which is y'all heard my presentation and this, what is change, and Franklin said it so beautifully with intimacy. And Dr. Davis and I have talked a few times on the phone recently. He said, I'm gonna talk about friendship. And I said, that sounds like a perfect way to wrap up what we're doing. You will remember I began this with a talk about a dream. And I used it, and I was looking for the symbol, the healing symbol. It's a Jungian thing. And if we're talking synchronicity, I said several times, the star bolts that bolted it back together. I said that at 2:00 today.
Wow. That's good.
According to Elaine, she's gonna arrange the next one. Not really, but we will do this again. And good to see y'all. Good to see. You should have your CEU stuff and an evaluation, and I will email you folks your CEU and
And Bruce, I'll just mention that Doyle and I have been talking that we might try to offer like a quarterly sort of Zoom meeting for a little bit of consultation, a little bit of accountability. But look in your email for something about that, because we may offer that up and to see if we have people that would be interested in doing that, even on maybe just a quarterly basis. To
brilliant.
kind of do the self-care, the friendship, and some of the accountability and that kind of stuff.
Bruce, I appreciate your making colleagues being with us.
Yeah.
And all together, it's just terrific.
I got my tickle box turned upside down. It reminded me of like being at a sporting event and you're on the jumbo. I just couldn't get it together.
I enjoyed doing that.
Beautiful. It doesn't get any better than this, y'all. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Bruce.
Travel safe.
Well, it's good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Bye, y'all. I'm gonna turn you off. Susan, you didn't say much, but I look forward to. Can we get more? Jenny, you ought to say something to Susan. Joel, Max, and Bill and I sort of trying to think, what can we do? And it was a great thing to do. Yeah.
thank you again.
That would love.
Yeah.